how much is your gold worth? Whether you've bought some or whether you have acquired it yourself by prospecting, how much is it worth? Well, you're going to say to me, Chris, it's on the market. You can check the internet and it'll tell you right now it's about $3,300 an ounce. But that's not the thing. The thing is, it also has to do with the purity of your natural gold. Now, if you bought gold that's 99.9%, okay, you can look that up on the internet. But if you got natural gold is rarely all that pure. Now, there's all kinds of videos on the internet about how to take gold bearing stuff, whether it's old jewelry or basically computer parts or stuff like that, and how to extract and convert that stuff and turn it into pure gold. But what about natural gold? Because natural gold, in all honesty, natural gold is never really fully pure. So how can you tell? How do you know what your purity is? A lot of prospectors that I talk to, this is a big issue, because I've talked to hundreds of guys over the years, and I hate to say this, but almost everybody overestimates the purity of their gold. Nobody hardly tells me their gold is less than 90% pure, and a lot of times people tell me, it's 98% or 95% or something like that, and the truth is, yes, there is some gold that's 98 or 95% pure, but that's really, really, really unusual. Most gold has a lot more impurities and isn't quite as pure. So how can you tell? Can you just look at the color? Well, certainly color is a good indicator. And, you can get a sort of a thing. You can't look at the color and say, well, that's 87.5% pure. It's not that close. You may look at that and say, well, maybe, I don't know, that's less than 90 and probably more than 80. So you can only get a rough estimate. So what color is natural gold anyway? What should it be? What is it? Let's take a look at some examples of natural gold in colors that you wouldn't expect.
So here are 5 nuggets. The upper 2 are the normal yellow color that you would expect for nice natural gold nuggets. But the bottom 3, the smaller ones, are gold too. They're also gold nuggets, but they have a lot of silver in them. And so they're kind of a yellow, green, silver kind of color. This is a material known as electrum, and we're going to be talking more about that in this video. This is a very beautiful specimen of electrum gold, very high silver, but a very beautiful crystalline pattern. And this is a kind of a thing that would sell for a lot of money. But you look at this and you may say, well, I just see silver. But it really is, may depend on the device that you're looking at it. It really is a pale, pale yellow color. It's gold, but it's probably on the order of 40% silver. This is the kind of buttery yellow, bright gold colored nugget that we're used to. This is from the North Fork of the Yuba River in Sierra County in the motherlode country of California. This is what you expect for average gold color, but it's not what everything looks like. Here's some more really nice big nuggets. If you look closely at this gold, it's a little lighter, just a hair lighter than the last piece, a little less yellow. And the truth is, this is a little bit higher in silver. This material, as I remember, these nuggets ran around 80% gold. And of course, the different colored gold alloys get used in jewelry. Like this is a Black Hills gold ring. And the pinkish colored pieces of gold on there are actually alloyed with copper, so that they take gold and an excess of copper to get the pink color. But the green is actually alloyed with an excess of silver. There's a certain level of silver in gold. When you add it, it starts looking green, and then eventually, as you add more and more silver, it just gets paler and paler in color to where it's pretty much all silver colored. So the different alloys of gold and the different colors of gold, they're used in jewelry and are appreciated for other purposes.
And actually the very first coins made by mankind were made out of this
high silver natural gold alloy called electrum. This came from an area which is now part of the western part of Turkey, but in ancient days it was a big source of gold, and interestingly, the geology there is fairly similar with the geology of Nevada, and Nevada also produces this electrum high silver alloy. And so this is before mankind knew to purify the gold, and they just took the natural alloy and made coins out of it. So what color is gold really? Well, it depends on the alloy, of course. And here's a chart that kind of gives you a feel for, alloys of gold. And this could be both natural and, man-made stuff like jewelry, okay? And you can see if you go all the way to the copper side on the lower right, then it's copper red. If you go all the way to the silver side on the lower left, then it's silver white. If you go to the top, straight in the middle, and it's pure gold, then you're going to see, basically the yellow color to slightly red color that's present in pure natural gold. But you can also look down on this and things grade, the yellow grades into a greenish to a pale greenish yellow to eventually white. And, on the red side, you get increasing red as you add more copper to the gold. And if you add a mix of copper and a mix of silver, then you can get, you keep your kind of yellowish color. And this is, of course, what you see in 14 karat jewelry, which 14 karat is 57.5%. Pure, and so the rest of it is copper and silver, but it's added at a ratio to keep the yellowish color. And when you're doing the Black Hills jewelry, then you add excess copper or you add the right amount of silver to get a greenish color, and that's what they do. So this chart is helpful. It's not perfect, but it can give you a good idea of what color gold alloys really are.
So now we know that natural gold can be found in a lot of different colors. And let's take a look at the geology. First, we're going to take a look at epithermal type deposits. Now, epithermal deposits are ones that form close to the surface, and they have a high tendency to be rich in silver. Now, that doesn't mean all of them are, but some of them, a good percentage, have significant silver in them. Examples of of an epithermal type district, probably the best known one in all the United States, is not far from where I live, the Comstock Lode up of Virginia City. It produced something like 200 million ounces of silver and 10 million ounces of gold. But you can see there's a lot more silver than gold. And so when the old time guys, it was first discovered as a placer, they were, doing panning and rocking and sluicing, and the gold that they were getting in that area, it was only about 60% pure. They had so much silver, most of the other 40% was silver, and so the gold was really pale. And so when they weighed out an ounce of gold, well, they'd get paid, an ounce of their placer, they'd get paid $12 per ounce anyway, when gold was, at that time, pure gold was $20.67 an ounce. They were only getting about, because it was only about 60% pure. Other famous epithermal districts in the United States, in Nevada anyway, include the Aurora district, include Tonopah, include Goldfield. In Arizona, there's several epithermal districts. Probably the best known is Oatman. And one of the biggest epithermal districts in all the United States also is the Cripple Creek district in Colorado. There's epithermals in New Mexico and other places. So, they are widespread. Nevada has probably most of the best known ones, but they're in other states too. And they tend to be producing this high silver gold. Not always. You can get some really yellow, fairly decent high purity gold in Nevada, but a lot of it is pale. So let's take a look at epithermal type deposits, how they work, how they form, and why they have so much silver in them.
Okay, here's my little diagram that I have that shows the relation of gold deposits and the depth that they form at. You can see at the surface is placer deposits in streams and rivers in the hills, but next down is epithermal and VMS and so on and so forth. The epithermal type is here, comparatively close to the surface. And here's the close-up. As it says, epithermal deposits are created close to the surface and typically in areas where magma comes near to the surface enough that it can provide heat to drive the systems. And it's often, in fact, that epithermal deposits are found in volcanic rocks themselves, although not always. They can be super rich in gold and silver and other metals as well.
Here's a little diagram that kind of explains better how these form. You have a shallow intrusive that is basically hot rock. Maybe it's been melted recently. Maybe it's just solidified and it's still really hot. But the heat drives the system. It causes water, that's the white arrows, to come in and circulate through the system. Lowest down, you have a base metal zone, but then you have a formation of veins rich in gold and silver, and where the gold and silver is can be somewhat variable. Sometimes it's actually quite close to the surface, but it's not unusual that you have hot springs showing themselves at the surface, and you may have a silica sinter zone where the material that comes out of the hot spring still has some quartz in it, and so it cools quickly and you get this sinter material that forms at the surface over and around these hot springs. They're very common in areas like Yellowstone. Though in Yellowstone, the mineralization would be well down below the surface, and nobody's going to be drilling holes or trying to mine in still super hot material just below the surface. The ones that are mined are ones that have been ancient and have cooled off, and so you're not having boiling water right at the surface. Let's take a look next at some examples of that silver-rich epithermal gold, the nuggets and specimens that come from those types of deposits.
This specimen of real pale yellow gold was found in Elko County in Nevada by a friend of mine with a metal detector. It's a nice specimen of electrum. Here's another specimen of Nevada electrum. This is very pale, almost silvery colored, and was found again with a metal detector at the site of an old mine in an old dump that they had next to it by another friend of mine. It's a nice piece, and the wire gold is really good to see.
Here's a beautiful piece of pale, crystalline, epithermal, electrum type gold from Mexico. A lot of the silver and gold mines in Mexico are of the epithermal type, and so they tend to produce some high silver gold. Next, let's talk about orogenic deposits. Now, orogenic is a fancy geologist word that just means it has to do with mountain building. So the mountain building process of uplifting rocks and that sort of thing has to do with these gold deposits, that they're related to that the same processes that uplift the mountains, also the faulting and other things that go with it, produce some types of gold deposits. And actually, orogenic deposits are some of the best known deposits around the earth. In the United States, the most famous one by far is the whole California Mother Lode country. That's all orogenic type deposits. But there's other really well-known ones, the Abitibi Belt in eastern Canada, and pretty much all of the gold in Western Canada and British Columbia and that sort of thing is all of this orogenic type. And there's other places. Most of the gold in Australia is of the orogenic type, although there's some epithermal in Australia up in the north and east corner of the country. But there's lots of orogenic gold. West Africa. That's the Birimian belt in West Africa. The greenstone belts out there in Western Africa have produced huge amounts of gold, and that's all orogenic type of gold. Ghana, that area, has all produced a lot of orogenic type gold. So let's talk about orogenic systems and why they produce gold and why their gold tends to be much less silver and much higher purity. So when you do see the orogenic gold, you're going to be expecting higher purity. Let's take a look at orogenic deposits.
Okay, here's my diagram again that shows the relative depth of formation of various types of gold deposits, common ones. And the deepest of the group here is the orogenic here at the bottom. It forms at depths of several miles up to maybe 5 or even 10 miles deep from the Earth's surface. And here's the close-up. Like I say, these deposits form under mountain building types of environments, often where the Earth's tectonic plates have collided and then built up mountains from the collision. The gold, along with other minerals, is often found in quartz veins, but in the epithermals, it's often found in quartz veins too, so that's not really anything unique. One of the things about these types of deposits is that they're generally low in base metals and also silver, and so they tend to be more just about the gold, not about gold and silver or gold and copper and other various base metals.
Okay, I said that in the orogenic deposits, the gold tends to be more yellow and more pure, but I'll tell you that I certainly have found in orogenic deposit areas in the mother lode country of California a few specimens here and there that just happen to be high in silver. It's not the norm. The norm is higher purity, but there are exceptions, and so and it all has to do with the chemistry of the fluids that form the gold deposits. If the chemistry happens to be rich in silver, it's going to be more silver rich. But in general, the orogenic deposits are higher purity, less silver and other stuff. Let's take a look at some of those.
And here's some nuggets that I took from the mother lode country in California. They're all from an orogenic type of deposit, and they're the nice yellow metallic color that you expect for gold nuggets. But like I say, over the years, I've found a few high silver, greenish colored nuggets in California and the mother lode country too, so they're not unheard of.
Here's another set of nuggets, about a 1/4 ounce that I took in the California mother lode country again. And as you can see, this is the normal yellow color. These are more water worn, unlike the other ones, which were never really spent much time in a stream, haven't been tumbled much. These have been tumbled and rounded, but they're still the same color, and they're probably between 85 to maybe a little over 90% pure.
Now, in natural gold, usually the biggest impurity is silver. Okay, that doesn't mean there aren't other things. It just, other than gold, the biggest impurity is usually silver, whether you're talking about orogenic or epithermal or even other types of gold deposits. Usually the biggest impurity is silver. But there can be copper, there can even be some platinum group metals. Palladium is found in some types of gold deposits, gold nuggets and that sort of thing. But it's unusual to have palladium in a significant amount with your gold is a little unusual, but it does happen. But copper and some other metals can be found in there as well. And so, you have these deposits like this. But there's also one of the things that guys who, I've had a lot of guys complain about refiners to me, and they'll tell me, well, I sent them 10 ounces of gold, and I only got paid for 7.5. Well, I don't understand how they could rip me off that way. Well, the truth is, a lot of times when you send placer gold, you don't think about the non-metallic impurities. And, with gold nuggets, there's often quartz and other things. Iron oxides can be there, and that stuff's not gold, and they're not going to pay you $3,300 an ounce for little bits of quartz or black sand or other things that aren't gold that are in your stuff that you send. That's why I almost always recommend to guys who are thinking about using a refiner, if you're going to send this gold in, and it's not specimen quality, it's not something that's going to have a high value greater than the bullion value, then just go ahead and melt it down, put it into a bar, And then you will know that what you're sending them. And you may find that, you weigh out 10 ounces of placer gold to send to a refiner, and you melt it down, and you find there's only 9 ounces of metal after you take out all the impurities. And then when you send them that 9 ounces, well, maybe it's only 85 or 90% pure, and so you only get paid for maybe 8 or 7.5 or something like that ounces of actual gold contained in your placer gold. It's a thing that tricks people. So let's take a look at some examples of that and talk about non-metallic impurities that go with your placer.
So let's start out talking about iron oxides. Now look at this gold here, and you can see that almost all of this gold, or at least a huge portion of it, has rusty red-brown colored material on there that looks like rust. Well, it is. It's basically iron oxides, the same as rust on a nail, and that's not gold. And so if you were to look at the purity of this overall, you weighed out so many ounces, and then when you sent it to a refiner, he said, well, we only had so many ounces of gold in there. You probably would look at the gold and say, hey, look, I weighed out 10 ounces of gold. How come I only got paid for 8? And, what you're not taking into account is the iron oxides, but also the quartz. So here I've used yellow circles to circle all the obvious quartz in each of these nuggets. And, it can add up to quite a bit, especially combined with the iron oxides. By the time you think about all the impurities and rock and stuff, and not even counting the weight of the gold metal, or the purity of the gold metal, just the junk, the iron oxides and quartz and whatever other junk, it can really drop your purity down quite a bit.
The only way to know you can look at color and get a general idea, but the only way to know for sure what the gold content of the metal that's in your placer deposits. Like I say, even if you melt it down into a bar, there's going to be silver and maybe a little copper and other impurities in your gold. The only way to know for sure is an assay test. And if you're sending in significant gold, 10 ounces of actual gold is well over $30,000. You might want to, one of the things that people do is you melt it down into a bar and then drill a hole into the bar, a small diameter hole, and take the cuttings and save them for an assay, because you can take just a little bit of the metal, by drilling up like an 1/8 inch diameter hole in your bar down 1/2 inch. The cuttings that come out, be careful to save them, they are gold. And then you can send that off to an assayer for testing. And if you have, significant gold that you're sending in for a refiner, it's good to have your own independent assay. So if the refiner comes back and says, well, your gold is only 82% pure, and you were expecting it to be 92% pure, well, you can have your own assay done by somebody independent, somebody that isn't going to make money by downgrading the gold in your bar, and have them do an assay. And if they say it's 82 also, well, then that may be what you got. If they say it's 92, well, then you need to go back to the refiner and say, hey, look, I had an independent test done. So assay testing is important, especially if you have a larger amount that you're sending in.
Now here is a gold bar, like I've been talking to you guys. It weighs a little over 55 ounces. This is a bar from the 1800s in California, where they basically did exactly as I was describing to you. They had a lot of gold and they melted it down into a bar, which got rid of whatever non-metallic materials, quartz and other junk that they had in it. And this bar is 0.875 fine. So it's 87.5% gold. The rest is going to be silver and some other stuff. But, this is a bar from California. It's the real thing, and it's 87%. And see, I have an old report that basically in those days, what you would do is you would melt it down and ship it to the mint. That was the best thing. And the mint would pay you in coin, silver and gold, for what you give to them. And I have a mint thing for here because in California they had a mint and a coinage. Actually, they had a U.S. mint in San Francisco. And if you were operating in the 1870s or 1880s, you're producing placer gold, you could melt it down into a bar like this, you'd send it off to the mint in San Francisco. Well, the mint in San Francisco took gold from all over California. And I have a report done by the head of the mint from that time frame showing what the fineness of all the gold from California is. And I got to tell you, actually 875 is on the higher end of purity. A lot of the gold is, 85, 75, 80.3, 85, 83, the lower gold comes from the epithermal places like San Bernardino in Inyo County, or San Bernardino is actually 70.5 because it has some epithermal, and the worst is Mono County, where the district of Bodie was, which was a gold silver district, and their gold was 55% fine, which is really terrible. But like I say, a lot of guys overestimate the purity of their gold. And the highest county in California for gold was Sacramento, and it was 89.8%, not quite 90% pure. That's a county-wide average. And that's what I'm telling you is a lot of California gold, even the orogenic stuff is, 85, 87 and a half like this one, 90, there's very few that are much over 90 and they exist, but there's not that many of them. So, if you're getting placer gold, it's probably, 85 to 90%, something like that. It might be a little higher, might be a little lower, especially if you're getting it from Nevada, it's probably lower. So an assay is what's necessary to really tell you what the purity is.
And finally, I want to talk about, talking about nuggets and purity and that kind of stuff. I want to talk about growth of gold in gravel. So we talked about a couple of, orogenic and epithermal types of deposits. These are types of hard rock deposits. But what about, people say, well, I think that nuggets grow in the gravels, that they get bigger and bigger. Well, that's really not the case. There have been studies done. In fact, a few years ago, gosh, it's been like 15 years ago now, an Australian outfit they got a bunch of big nuggets and they sliced them open, they etched them to see, do they have, because if it's growing in the water, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, then it would have a growth pattern that kind of looked like a tree, where you have rings of growth going out and out and out. They cut it open, and the number of nuggets that showed a tree type or ring pattern, like growing like a tree, was 0. So let me talk a little bit about growth of gold in gravels, because that's really not a thing. It may be rarely in some places, but generally not. The truth is about secondary gold that forms later at normal surface temperatures, not super hot water like the epithermals or the orogenics or some of the other types of gold deposits. Gold that's formed at near surface temperatures, what they call secondary. It's formed from whatever was their primary to begin with, then weathering processes and that kind of chemistry and that kind of thing. There is such a thing as secondary gold, absolutely, no question that it does. But the truth is, generally speaking, that gold is small. It's pretty small, and it just doesn't form big nuggets. It's usually too small for a metal detector to see. But I will tell you that the purity of stuff formed at the surface is actually high. And so the records for the purest natural gold ever found, which is, in the 99% plus, it's all secondary gold. It's gold that's grown from weathering and oxidation of telluride minerals that are high in gold. And the natural gold that forms off of that at surface temperatures is actually very high purity. So let me talk about that and show you a slide, and we'll talk about the details of why secondary gold is generally purer.
So this nugget is from Michigan, where the copper nuggets and sometimes silver grow at temperatures basically on the surface, cold, room temperature, that kind of thing. And they grow from solutions. And then you look at this and you see that the silver and gold have separated each other. At the cool temperatures, the copper or the silver can't incorporate each other into the metal that they're forming. At elevated temperatures inside veins and that sort of thing, you can incorporate copper into silver, silver into gold, all those sorts of things. But at room temperature, you'd get something like this. So if nuggets grew at room temperature, the silver that was with them would be separated. And instead of having copper silver nuggets like this, you'd have a gold silver nugget separated, the two of them, like this. But the truth is they grow at high temperatures, and that's why it's mixed.
Finally, whatever types of gold you're going after, and whatever purity you find that your gold is, and whatever you deal with, finding gold is a skill. And, whether you buy it or whether you find it for yourself, that skill to find it is something that you need to be successful. And the more you know, the more likely you're going to be successful in your prospecting. And in part to you, the 40 plus years of experience that I have and my degree in mining engineering, I wrote a book called Fistful of Gold. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my book in just a second, but I also have partnered with an outfit called High Plains Prospectors. They sell a full line of prospecting equipment. So if you're interested in learning more, you're interested in buying a little equipment, they have everything from, cheap gold pans, only a few dollars, up through, really expensive metal detectors. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about both my book and High Plains right now. This is my book, Fistful of Gold. It's an encyclopedia of everything you need to know to go out and find gold for yourself. It distills down my 45 years of experience out in the field prospecting, as well as my degree in mine engineering. It's, like I say, an encyclopedia. There's a lot to it. It's over 250,000 words long, hundreds of pages with hundreds of illustrations, teaching you what you need to know about geology, about mining districts, about techniques of finding gold. It covers metal detectors, sluicing, panning, dry washing, high bankers, you name it, it's covered in there. It talks some about platinum and diamonds, but it's mostly about gold because gold is more widespread. It is not so much a book about where to find gold, but a book about how to find gold. Because even if you have a location where gold was mined in the past and you go out there, well, where should you look to be successful in your prospecting, to find the gold that's there? This is the book that's going to tell you that information. I spent most of 10 years writing this book, so I thought a long time about it. It's got, like I say, lots of information and lots of illustrations, and I've had results from people who bought it. It's available on Amazon, but I recommend buying it through High Plains Prospectors, and I'll put a link in the description for buying this book through them. They have a better price than Amazon, and I have a special deal that I'll tell you a little bit more about, where you can get a 5% discount from the price even with that. On Amazon, the book rates a 4.7 out of 5, which means that of all the people that have bought it, they've been really highly satisfied, and I think you, if you buy my book, will be just as highly satisfied as well. Now let's talk a little bit more about High Plains Prospectors. They're a prospecting shop, a mail order prospecting shop that I've partnered with. The deal is that I can get you a 5% discount, a coupon code, and I'm going to put the code to that right here. It's just Chris Ralph, all caps with no space between Chris and Ralph. You put that in there as a discount code and you'll get 5% off their already really good prices. I think it's a great deal where where you win by getting a discount. I get a little percentage of that, and they get new business. So if you need prospecting supplies, High Plains is really the way to go. And I'll put information, like I say, in the description more about how you can work with them, because I'm working with them. They really are great guys, a great company. For even more information, I also have a website, and I'm going to show you my webpage and talk a little bit more about that right now.
This is my webpage. It's located at NevadaOutbackGems.com. You can Google it, or I have a link down in the description below. But there's lots of information here, miscellaneous stuff, pictures, some historic information as well, stories. It's got a lot of great fun stuff. You'll probably be interested in it.
Now, on all of my YouTube videos, I encourage you guys to ask questions. If you have thoughts, comments, suggestions for things that I ought to look at in my videos, things that you want to find out more about, and I answer 100% of my questions. There's not very many YouTubers out there that answer 100% of their questions. I'm one of the few. And so I will do my best to answer what you have. I mean, I only can write so much. Sometimes the answer is something where I'm going to recommend that you buy the book and read about it. I also ask that you subscribe to my channel, click the bell notification so that every time I come out with a new video, you'll be able to watch it. And like I say, I cover a huge amount of topics. I also have 250 videos that I've already done. And so you can go back through my catalog of videos on YouTube. I'm sure there'll be many videos there that you'll want to take a look at, especially if you have any interest in gold or platinum, diamonds, gemstones, geology, and that sort of stuff. My YouTube site is going to be right up your alley. So I'll see you again real soon. We'll be out in the field and back in the office at the whiteboard. And whether we're looking at gold or platinum, diamonds, gemstones, or other interesting geology, it's going to be fun. You're going to enjoy it, and we'll see you again real soon.